Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we are continuing journal collection number 37, and it dates from the year 1846. And we are up to, well, we're not up to actually a specific date. This particular journal collection contains few um, dates and lots of just topic heads. So I'm not quite sure actually even where we are in the course of 1846, but we're about, as far as this edition goes, like 50 pages or so from the end. I'm actually going to try to read all of this in one go and see if I can just upload that, and then we can get to journal collection 38 in the next video. And with that said, I'll go ahead and start reading. The first topic is criticism. Criticism. The next generation will thank Dickens for showing so many mischiefs which parliaments and Christianities had not been strong enough to remove. Punch, too, has done great service. Fourier, Saint-Simon, Bentham, Louis Blanc, Owen, Leroux, and the Chartist leader, all crazy men, and so they pound on one string till the whole world knows that. Here are two or three things to be discriminated. First, the perception of our polarity impressed on the universe and on the particles. Tell children what you say about writing and laboring with the hands. I know better. Can you distill rum by minding it at odd times, or analyze soils, or carry on the Suffolk Bank, or the Greenwich Observatory, or sail a ship through the Narrows by minding the helm when you happen to think of it, or serve a glass house, or a steam engine, or a telegraph, or a railroad express, or accomplish anything good or anything powerful in this manner? Nothing whatever. And the greatest of all arts, the subtlest and most miraculous effect, you fancy, is to be practiced with a pen in one hand and a crowbar or a peat knife in the other. All power is of geometrical increase, and to this painting the education is the costliest, and mankind cannot afford to throw away on ditching or wood sawing the man on whom choicest influences have been concentrated, its baruch or scribe. Just as much and just as exercise as this costly creature needs, he may have, and he may breathe himself with a spade or a rapier as he likes, not as you like, and I should rather say, bad as I think the rapier, that it were as much to his purpose as the other implement. Both are bad, are only rare and medicinal resorts. The writer must live and die by his writing. Good for that, and good for nothing else. A war, an earthquake, the revival of letters, the new dispensation by Jesus or by angels, heaven, hell, powers, science, the neont, exist only to him as colors for his brush. That you think he can write at odd minutes only shows what your knowledge of writing is. American writing can be written at odd minutes. Unitarian writing, charlatan writing, Congress speeches, railroad novels. Hawthorne invites his readers too much into his study, opens the process before them, as if the confectioner should say to his customers, "Now let us make the cake." Truth indeed, we talk as if we had it, or sometimes said it, or knew anything about it. Morals. We have never heard that music. It is that which is sung to the fates by sirens or by their mystic whirling wheel. That is what all speeches aim to say and all actions to evolve. Literature, epics, tragedies, histories are only apology, interlude, makeshift in the absence of that. It is the basis of all the elements we know, and is as readily reached from one as from another point. Anacreon, Hafitz, Horace, Herrick come out on it from drinking songs as easily as Newton from stars and Jeremy Taylor from a funeral sermon. In the Delphin Juvenals and other poets, they print the moral sentences in Roman capitals, and Pope asterisked Shakespeare, and in early Greece they carved the sentences of the 7 wise masters on stones by the roadside, and the Christian inscribed the church walls with the commandments and Lord's Prayer. I believe I must transcribe below some sentences I find on a stray leaf that seems to belong to some old lecture which refer to this point. If I dared, I would summon a class to lectures on moral philosophy, for I well know that all real aid and inspiration which we can owe each other is therein. It is really only so much moral philosophy as enters into any discourse or any action that is memorable and gives value to the rest. All the rest is overture or interlude to fill the time and make the company forget the absence of the great performer. But, on the instance when we rise so high as to see and affirm the ethical law in relation to our business, no apology is needed. We feel that we have come together for a worthy purpose, and would have done so though we had traveled hundreds of miles. If I am unworthy, if I am forbidden to pass within the paling and to tell any secret of generosity and immortality, it is vain that I speak at all. I am only one pretender more. I hover still with inextinguishable hope about that mountain even in my exclusion, happy to be in its neighborhood, for, quote, of divine things, it is said, the confines are reverend, end quote. The reason why I pound so tediously on that string of the exemption of the writer from all secular works is our conviction that his work needs a frolic health to execute. Nature never draws the moral, but leaves it for the spectator. Neither does the sculptor, nor the painter, nor the poet. The moral equalizes all. It is the law. It takes no heed of the flaws of the material, but fashions its cups and vases after its now divine model, alike of porcelain, or of potter's earth, or of water, or of air, as you fetch it stock, or fetch it none. The best is to be had. Under the whip of the driver, the slave shall feel his equality with kings. The nothingness of all, the omnipotence of all, as they share the principle which fashions suns and earth, and the dreams of their dreamers, gossamer solid and gossamer in webs. Wit has a great charter, but if the metaphysicians or learned German doctors mutter and analyze a little, the king cries with Diotima, "None of the gods philosophizes," and sends the police to him. Surface. The animals crawl on or fly over the rind of the planet, and the fishes and whales swim only at the surface of the water. You might skim the whole mammalia with a kitchen dipper. In the deep sea and under the crust all is still, nothing stirs. Human life and thought is not less external. Nobody is profoundly good or bad. Were they profound, they would satisfy. Swedenborg must have the credit of opening many new doors in what has been esteemed for ages dead wall, as Belzoni discovered chambers in the pyramids. Then nobody knows his sources of information. Quote, St. Peter a Unitarian, Isaac Newton a Unitarian. That is neither here nor there, but if you will find the maple and elm, granite, slate, and slime to be of your party in opinion, that were something. That moral nature abhors slavery, and New England sides with moral nature against South Carolina in animal nature. The skeptics have got hold of Park Street Church, and will not let the body of the martyr Tory come into it, for fear the crowd will spoil their carpets. The skeptics have got into the Abolition Society, and make believe to be enraged. Fire fights fire, the larger faith the less. How shall I educate my children? If I were a member of the Massachusetts legislature, I should propose to exempt all colored citizens from taxation because of the inability of the government to protect them by passport out of its territory. It does not give the value for which they pay the tax. Also, I should recommend that the executive wear no sword, and the office of general be abolished and the whole militia disbanded. For if these persons do not know what they pretend to be, and to do somewhat which they are not and do not, Hoare of Concord, Walker of the branded hand Tory, the martyr, know that the sword of Massachusetts is a sword of lath or a turkey feather. It gives me no pleasure to see the governor attended by military men in plumes. I am amazed that they do not feel the ridicule of their position. New England is subservient. The president proclaims war, and those senators who dissent are not those who know better, but those who can afford to, as Benton and Calhoun. Democracy becomes a government of bullies tempered by editors, the editors standing in the privilege of being last devoured. Captain Reinders tempered by Father Ritchie and O'Sullivan. Oliver Wellington described to me Samantha Crawford of Oakham, who thought and felt in such strict sympathy with a friend in the spiritual world that her thought ultimated itself in a preternatural writing on her arm, and again into writing on a paper which seemed to float in at the open window and alighted on her lap. Cunning. Short-sightedness of the mechanics is wonderful. To win from you an advantage of a few shillings or a few dollars, they will take the risk of the long discontent and heart-burning of the housemates who will take in future any pains to avoid employing them again. Certainly it cost too much, those $2 or $3. Mirabeau said, "Madame, if there were no such thing as probity, it would be invented as a means of getting on in the world." The reason of this cheating, however, is plain. It is their inability to make good calculations. They have found themselves short, they had miscalculated, and they now go to piece the hide of the lion by the skin of the fox. To every creature its own weapon, however skilfully concealed. I thought myself laid open, without walls, to the hoofs of all the cattle, but found many years ago that the eyes of all comers respected some fence which I could not see. The very strawberry vines can hide their berry from fumble and keep it for Cupid. Tending. When we know not how to steer and dare not hoist a sail, we can float. One thing we have, though it is not of us, continuity. I live now a little this way, then a little that, but nature, independently of our mathematics, secures a consecutiveness which later we acknowledge with pleased surprise. Do you say that the current goes downstream? No, these are ocean currents, and the currents of that ocean I speak of go in all directions, up, down, sideways, by exhalation and by radiation. The exhalation which we call death is still in the current, and the current knows the way. Continuity of nature, not of us. We have been baptized, vaccinated, schooled, churched, married. In the city of make-believe is a great ostentation bolstered up on a great many small ostentations. I think we escape something by living in the villages. In Concord here there is some milk of life. We are not so raving distracted with wind and dyspepsia. The mania takes a milder form. People go a-fishing and know the taste of their meat. They cut their own whipple-tree in the wood-lot. They know something practically of the sun and the east wind, of the underpinning and the roofing of the house, of the pan and the mixture of the soils. In the city of make-believe, all the marble edifices were veneered, and all the columns were drums. A scholar is a literary foundation. All his expense is for Plato, Fabricius, Selden, Bentley. Scholar. Scholarship is our religion. We attempt practice, urged by nature, and are swamped at once in the profane miscellany, and by religious instinct we recover the shore as quick as we can, and in fault of power to execute our thought, we console us at least with delineating the picture. May 23rd. In Carlyle's head photograph, which came last night, how much appears, how unattainable this truth to any painter. Here have I the inevitable traits which the sun forgets not to copy, and which I thirst to see, but which no painter remembers to give me. Here have I the exact sculpture, the form of the head, the rooting of the hair, thickness of the lip, the man that God made. And all the Lawrences and Dorsays will now serve me well as illustration. I have the form and organism, and can do better spare the expression and color. What would I not give for a head of Shakespeare by the same artist, of Plato, of Demosthenes? Here I have the jutting brow and the excellent shape of the head, and here the organism of the eye, full of England, the valid eye in which I see the strong executive talent, which has made his thought available to the nations, whilst others as intellectual as he are pale and powerless. The photograph comes dated 25th April 1846, and he writes, "I am 50 years old." Boston or Brattle Street Christianity is a compound of force, or the best diagonal line that can be drawn between Jesus and the Abbot Lawrence. How beautiful the manners of wild animals, the bird that trims herself by the stream, the habits of antelope and buffalo. Well, the charm of genius is the same. We wish man on the higher plane to exhibit also the wildness or nature of that higher plane, but the biography of genius so thirsted for is not yet written. We educate and drill, we hot press and polish, but the audacities of genius are one thing, and the skill of drill another. Superstition. We do not now make laws, like our ancestors, forbidding under severe penalties all persons whatsoever from transporting themselves through the air by night. Fruiter fama. No, never. The poet is least a poet when he sits crowned. The transcendental and divine has the dominion of the world on the sole condition of not having it. Rus ruus. To the page on narcotics in The Poet is to be added the confession that the European history is the age of wine. The age of water, the simpler and sublimer condition when the wine is gone inward, or the constitution has powers of original chemistry and can draw the wine of wine from water, as the earth from loam and water adduces the orange. The pomegranate, plum, peach, and pineapple is yet to be, is now in its coming. We shall not have a sincere literature, we shall not have anything sound and grand as nature itself, until the bread-eaters and water-drinkers come. We are slain by indirections. Give us the question of slavery, yea or nay. Texas, yea or nay. War, yea or nay. We should all vote right, but we accept the devil himself in an indirection. What taxes will we not pay in coffee, sugar, etc., but spare us a direct tax? To the fir tree by my study window come the ground sparrow, oriole, cedar bird, common crossbill, yellow bird, goldfinch, catbird, party-colored warbler, robin. Community. I remember often Greenow's fine eulogy of Phidias and his antique comrades who fought together to make a frieze or a statue, for so intractable is the material of the sculptor that otherwise his heat is expended before his work is sufficiently forward to keep him in heart for it. How many things should a community exist for, as pictures, maps, dictionaries and apparatus, as telescopes and galvanic battery, etc. Now I think of committees to read books and on oath report of them. A scholar is crafty and hides his reading. He is full of ends and reservations. I wish such report as a brother gives to a brother, or a husband to a wife. I will read Behmen, if you will read Swedenborg, and we will read it as generous gods, each for the other. The committees must be as naked and liberal as gods in their agency. Here is Fourier with unsettled claims. Here is always Plato, even Livy I once searched and reported on. I will take one if another, who values his time as much as I, will take another book. There is, beyond this, a deeper, stricter community. We converse as spies. Our very abstaining to repeat and credit the fine remark of our friend is thievish. Each man of thought is surrounded by wiser men than he, if they cannot write as well. Cannot he and they combine? Cannot they sink their jealousies in God's love and call their poem Beaumont and Fletcher's or the Theban phalanxes? The city will, for 9 days or 9 years, make differences and sinister comparisons. There is a newer and more excellent public that will bless the friends. Yet is not community the dream of Bedlam? Men are so discordant and of unequal pulse, and excellence is inflamed or exalted in individualism. Cotton thread holds the Union together, unites John C. Calhoun and Abbot Lawrence. Patriotism for holidays and summer evenings, with music and rockets, but cotton thread is the Union. Eloquence. We go to the bar, the senate, the shop, the study as peaceful professions, but you cannot escape the demand for courage, no, not in the shrine of peace itself. Pillsbury, whom I heard last night, is the very gift from New Hampshire which we have long expected, a tough oak stick of a man not to be silenced or insulted or intimidated by a mob, because he is more mob than they. He mobs the mob. John Knox is come at last, on whom neither money, nor politeness, nor hard words, nor rotten eggs, nor kicks and brickbats make the slightest impression. He is fit to meet the barroom, wits and bullies. He is a wit and a bully himself, and something more. He is a graduate of the plough and the cedar swamp and the snowbank, and has nothing new to learn of labor or poverty or the rough of farming. His hard head, too, had gone through in boyhood all the drill of Calvinism, with text and mortification, so that he stands in the New England Assembly a purer bit of New England than any, and flings his sarcasms right and left, sparing no name or person or party or presence. The Concord Freeman of the last week he held in his hand, the editor was in the audience, and read the paragraph on the Mexican War from it, and then gave his own version of that fact. What question could be more pertinent than his to the Church? What is the Church for, if whenever there is any moral evil to be grappled with, as intemperance or slavery or war, there needs to be originated an entirely new instrumentality? Mr. Ruggles of Fall River, whom I once heard in a conversation at the Lyceum, appeared to me a formidable debater. He had a strong personality which made nothing of his antagonists. They were baubles for his amusement. His light scoffing and, as it were, final dealing with them, seeming to weigh them and find them nothings, was exquisitely provoking. Oh, yes, abolition or abstinence from rum, or any other far off and external virtue that will divert attention from the all-containing virtue which we vainly dodge and postpone, but which must be met and obeyed at last, if we wish to be substance and not accidents. Who cannot be famous, said Osmond, since I am? Life is a selection, no more. The work of the gardener is simply to destroy this weed or that shrub or that tree, and leave this other to grow. The library is gradually made inestimable by taking out from the superabounding mass of books all but the best. Things collect very fast of themselves. The difference between house and house is the wise omissions. A good success. Alva Crocker, Sewell F. Belknap, Patrick Jackson, F. C. Lowell, Croton Walter Commissioner, Upjohn, Wiley and Putnam, W. H. Eliot, Horace Greeley, W. L. Garrison, J. J. Astor, Catlin. Alcott a survivor of the institutions. Superstition. Pillsbury, commenting on Beecher's precious distinction of organic sins, made, that is, by law, said that the American Church ought to adopt a new formula and say, I baptize thee in the name of the Governor and the Senate and of the House of Representatives. And really, instead of Walter Scott's superstitions, the virtual superstitions now are the deference to a supposed public opinion, to a parliamentarianness to which, for example, Governor Briggs has just now immolated the state of Massachusetts. Alcott said that whatever could be done with the eye he could do, meaning gardening, architecture, and, I suppose, picture and sculpture. I look for poetry above rhyme, poetry which the inspirer makes and applauds. The orator and the poet must be cunning Daedalus, and yet made of milk like the mob. My friend said that the orator must have a dash of the devil in him to suit an audience. At least his rhetoric must be satanic. There is also something excellent in every audience, capacity of virtue. Archangels listen in lowly forms, archangels in satinet and gambroon. So fleeting as it is, yet what is so excellent of present power as the riding this wild horse of the people? Every reform is only a mask under cover of which a more terrible reform, which dares not yet name itself, advances. Slavery and anti-slavery is the question of property, and no property, rent and anti-rent. And anti-slavery dare not say that every man must do his own work, or at least receive no interest for money. Yet that is at last the upshot. The scrupulous and law-abiding become Whigs. The unscrupulous and energetic are locofocos. The people are no worse since they invaded Mexico than they were before, only they have given their will a deed. The United States will conquer Mexico, but it will be as the man swallows the arsenic, which brings him down in turn. Mexico will poison us. The Southerner is cool and insolent. We drive you to the wall and will again. Yes, gentlemen, but do you know why Massachusetts and New York are so tame? It is because we own you, and you are very tender of our mortgages, which cover all your property. The stout Fremont, in his report of his expedition to Oregon and California, is continually remarking on the group, on the picture, etc., which we make. Our secondary feeling, our passion for seeming, must be highly inflamed if the terrors of famine and thirst for the camp, and for the cattle terrors from the Arapahoes and Utahs, anxieties from want of true information as to the country and the trail, and the excitement from hunting and from the new and vast features of unknown country, could not repress this eternal vanity of how we must look. I play with the miscellany of facts and take those superficial views which we call skepticism. There are so many ways of looking at the man. You call him ungrateful because he does not flatter you, who say that you conferred favors on him. He thinks that which he took of you was no more yours than the air which he breathed in your house. He thinks that favors should be returned in kind and not in money. That is, that your strength should be returned by his strength, not by his weakness. You served, did you not, your genius, and the indications of nature and providence as well as you could interpret them in serving him. He will not be less generous in his reciprocations. He is grateful, but you must leave him to designate who is the benefactor. June 27th. The poet should instill himself and shove all usurpers from their chairs by electrifying mankind with the right tone, long wished for, never heard. The true center thus appearing, all false centers are suddenly superseded, and grass grows in the capital. Now and then we hear rarely a true tone, a single strain of the right ode, but the poet does not know his place. He defers to these old conventions, and though sometimes the rogue knows well enough that every word of his treason to all the kings and conventions of the world, yet he says, "It is only I, nobody minds what I say," and avails himself of the popular prejudice concerning his insignificance as a screen from the police. We had conversation today concerning the poet and his problem. He is there to see the type and truly interpret it. O mountain, what would your highness say, thou grand expressor of the present tense of permanence? Yet is there also a taunt at the mutables from old Sidfest. If the poet could only forget himself and his theme, be the tongue of the mountain, his egotism would subside, and that firm line which he had drawn would remain like the names of discoverers of planets, written in the sky in letters which could never be obliterated. A man is caught up and takes a breath or two of the eternal, but instantly descends and puts his eternity to commercial uses. But a pretty kettle of fish we have here, men of this vast ambition, who wish an ethics commensurate with nature, who sit expectant to be challenged to great performances, and are left without any distinct aim. There are openings only in the heavens before them, but no star which they approach. They have an invincible persuasion that the right is to come to them in the social form, but they are aghast and desolate to know that they have no superiors in society. Society treats their conscience as it does men of genius. The only compliment it knows how to pay a man of genius is to wait on him and to ask him to deliver a temperance address. So it proffers to these holy angels, wishing to save the world, some bead or button of communism, an anti-slavery cause, prison discipline, or maudlin refuge, or some other absorbent to suck his vitals into someone or some other bitter partiality, and anyhow to deprive him of that essential condition which he prays for, adequateness. Henry Thoreau seems to think that society suffers for want of war, or some good excitement. But how partial that is. The masses suffer for want of work as barbarous as they are. What is the difference? Now the tiger has got a joint of fresh meat to tear and eat. Before he had only bones to grind and gnaw. But this concerns only the tigers, and leaves the men where they are. The snails believe the geniuses are constitutionally skeptical. I lament that wit is a light mocker, that knowledge is the knowing that we cannot know, that genius is criticism. I lament to have a life cheap, that a great understanding should play with the world as he tosses his walking stick and catches it again. I wish the years and months to be long, the days, centuries, loaded, fragrant. Now we reckon them basely as bank days, by some debt that we are to pay, or that is to be paid us. Now, if there were an affection, a friendship that could be sovereign, that would at once bridge over these volcanic craters and gulf of inequality between the doer and the task. Society. Society is a curiosity shop full of odd excellences, a Brahmin, a fakir, a giraffe, an alligator, Colonel Bowie, Alva Crocker, Bronson Alcott, Henry Thoreau, a world that cannot keep step, admirable melodies, but no chorus, for there is no accord. Yankeedom. The Yankee means to make moonlight work, if he can, and he himself, after he has spent all the business hours in Wall Street, takes his dinner at a French boarding-house, that his soup and cutlet may not be quite unprofitable, but he shall learn the language between the mouthfuls. I rode in the stagecoach with a peddler. "Mind the half-cent," said my companion. "A man can about pay his shop-rent by minding the half-cent." The only gift to men, the only event, is a new image, a new symbol. Think how many more eggs of that kind remain to be hatched, when the underside of every stick and stone all round the lake is covered with them. Editor's note. Here follows in the journal the condensed thought for the poem which Mr. Emerson made for a motto to the essay Circles, and below it the improving attempts to versify it. End note. Nature hates lines, rolls herself into balls, and generates new. Man, who knows the most, is confined to surfaces outside, and only learns the profile of the sphere, which is a circle. Nature, hating lines and walls, self-willed, rolls her into balls, generating satellites. Ill-observed by peeping man, very wisest of his clan, anchored fast to the outsides, half learns the profile of the sphere, wise if he knew what that signified. Nature, hating lines and walls, rolls her matter into balls. Ah, her wise ephemerals, nailed to surface and outside, see the profile of the sphere. Knew they what that signified, a new Genesis were here. Editor's note. Below, the editors introduce the finished poem. See Essays, second series, also Poems. End note. Nature centers into balls, and her proud ephemerals, fast to surface and outside, scan the profile of the sphere, wist they the thing signified, a new Genesis were here. Criticism is in its infancy. The anatomy of genius it has not unfolded. Milton in the egg it has not found. Milton is a good apple on that tree of England. It would be impossible by any chemistry we know to be compounded that apple otherwise. It required all the tree, and out of 1,000 of apples, good and bad, this specimen apple is at last procured. That is, we have a well-knit, hairy, industrious Saxon race, Londoners intent on their trade, steeped in their politics. Wars of the Roses, voyages and trade to the Low Countries, to Spain, to Lepanto, to Virginia and Guiana, all bright with use and strong with success. Out of this valid stock choose the validest boy, and in the flower of his strength open to him the whole Dorian and Attic beauty and the preceding ripeness of the same in Italy. Give him the very best of this classic beverage. He shall travel to Florence and Rome in his early manhood. He shall see the country in the works of Dante, Angelo, and Raphael. Well on the man to whose unpalled taste this delicious fountain is opened. Add the fury and concentration of the Hebraic genius through the hereditary and already culminated Puritanism, and you have Milton, a creation impossible before or again, and all whose graces and whose majesties involve this wonderful combination. Quite in the course of things once, but not iterated. The drill of the regiment, the violence of the pirate and smuggler, the cunning and thrift of the haberdasher's counter, the generosity of the Norman earl, are all essential to the result. Mixture. The whole art of nature is in these juxtapositions of diverse qualities to make a lucky combination, as green and gold, dry oak leaves and snow, enhance each other and make a delicious mixture to the eye. Everything that makes a new sort of man is good, for though he is only a chemic dose in this generation, in the next or next but one, he becomes a poet, and then the new metal becomes inestimable. People do not value raw material. The laws of Menu, Bhagavat, Bayman, Swedenborg, Alcott, Channing, and what not, I may have to myself, nobody to quarrel with me for these masses or particles. But when I have mixed these simples with a little Boston water, it makes what they call poetry and eloquence, and will sell, it seems, in New York and London. O Bacchus, make them drunk, drive them mad, this multitude of vagabonds, hungry for eloquence, hungry for poetry. Test. Opportunity. Do they stand immovable there, the sots, and laugh at your so-called poetry? They may well laugh, it does not touch them yet. Try a deeper strain. There is no make-believe about these fellows. They are good test for your skill. Therefore a louder yet, and yet a louder strain. There is not one of them but will spin fast enough when the music reaches him, but he is very deaf. Try a sharper string. Angels and hunting knives and rifles, swearing angels, roarers with liquor. O poet, you have much to learn. Styles. There is the Periclean and there is the slam-bang style. O Carlyle, the merit of glass is not to be seen, but to be seen through. But every crystal and lamina of the Carlyle glass is visible. Let the poet work in the aim to eliminate beauty. That is verily his work, in that block of stone, in that rough verse, to free the noble conception until it shall be as truly God's work as is the globe of the earth, or the cup of the lily. Meter of the poet, again, is his science of love. Does he know that lore? Never was poet who was not tremulous with love lore. Editor's note. Mr. Emerson, in preparing a second edition of the essays, graced them with mottos. Here follows the first attempt for the motto for Spiritual Laws. See Essays, First Series, and Poems. End note. Heaven is alive, self-built and quarrying itself, upbuilds eternal towers. Self-commanded works and vital cirque, by dint of being all, its loss is transmutation. Fears not the craft of undermining days, grows by decays, and by the famous might that lurks in recreation and recoil. Teach flames to freeze and ice to boil, and through the arms of all the devils build the firm seat of innocence. No lapse of memory betrays the angel into unbelief, but in the beginning sees the time to come, and on the road his home he cannot fear defeat. Longevity. I have lamented the brevity of life, and yet it is easy to see that the stability of human beings depends on that consideration. Who would stay in Concord who had heard of Valencia, but that there is not time to establish himself there without too great a hazard of his happiness in the few years that remain. Therefore we stick where we are. Is not America more than ever wanting in the male principle? A good many village attorneys have saucy village talents preferred to Congress and the cabinet, Marcys, Buchanans, Walkers, etc., but no great captains. Webster is a man by himself of the great mold, but he also underlies the American blight and wants the power of the initiative, the affirmative talent, and remains, like the literary class, only a commentator, his great proportions only exposing his defect. America seems to have immense resources, land, men, milk, butter, cheese, timber, and iron, but it is a village littleness. Village squabble and rapacity characterize its policy. It is a great strength on a basis of weakness. Perhaps the fairer picture of the permissive destiny, we can see what it allows, what the vegetable nature grows to if unpruned, what fancies, what appetites are the crop of this plant, man, what destiny will, "What's your wool?" Editor's note: the declaration of war with Mexico was promulgated May 13th, 1846. End note. These, rabble, at Washington are really better than the sniveling opposition. They have a sort of genius of a bold and manly cast, though satanic. They see, against the unanimous expression of the people, how much a little well-directed effrontery can achieve, how much crime the people will bear, and they proceed from step to step, and it seems they have calculated but too justly upon your excellency, O Governor Briggs. Mr. Webster told them how much the war cost. That was his protest, but voted the war and sends his son to it. They calculated rightly on Mr. Webster. My friend Mr. Thoreau has gone to jail rather than pay his tax. On him they could not calculate. The abolitionists denounce the war and give much time to it, but they pay the tax. It seems now settled that the world is no longer a subject for reform. It is too old for that, and is to have custard and calves' jelly. We are no longer to apply drastic or alternative pills, nor attempt remedies at all, but if we have any new game or some fireworks or ice cream. If Jenny Lind come hither, or Fanny Eltzer return, it is all the case admits. Boston is represented by Mr. Winthrop, whose ready adhesion to Southern policy outspeeds even the swift sequaciousness of his constituents. The state is a poor, good beast who means the best. It means friendly. A poor cow who does well by you, do not grudge it its hay. It cannot eat bread, as you can. Let it have without grudge a little grass for its 4 stomachs. It will not stint to yield you milk from its teat. You who are a man walking cleanly on 2 feet will not pick a quarrel with a poor cow. Take this handful of clover and welcome. But if you go to hook me when I walk in the fields, then, poor cow, I will cut your throat. Don't run amuck against the world. Have a good case to try the question on. It is the part of a fanatic to fight out a revolution on the shape of a hat or surplice, on paedobaptism or altar rails or fish on Friday. As long as the state means you well, do not refuse your pistorine. You have a tottering cause. 90 parts of the pistorine it will spend for what you think also good, 10 parts for mischief. You cannot fight heartily for a fraction, but wait until you have a good difference to join issue upon. Thus Socrates was told he should not teach. Please God, but I will. And he could die well for that. And Jesus had a cause. You will get one by and by, but now I have no sympathy. The abolitionists ought to resist and go to prison in multitudes on their own and describe disagreements from the state. They know where the shoe pinches. Have told it 1,000 times, are hot-headed partialists. I should heartily applaud them. It is in their system, but not so for your generalizers. You are not citizens. You are not, as they, to fight for your title to be church members or citizens, patriots. Reserve yourself for your own work. Alcott thought he could find as good a ground for quarrel in the state tax as Socrates did in the Edict of the Judges. Then I say, be consistent and never more put an apple or a kernel of corn into your mouth. Would you feed the devil? Say boldly, there is a sword sharp enough to cut sheer between flesh and spirit, and I will use it, and not any longer belong to this double-faced, equivocating, mixed Jesuitical universe. The abolitionists should resist because they are literalists. They know exactly what they object to, and there is a government possible which will content them. Remove a few specified grievances, and this present commonwealth will suit them. They are the new Puritans, and as easily satisfied, but you nothing will content. No government short of a monarchy, consisting of one king and one subject, will appease you. Your objection, then, to the state of Massachusetts is deceptive. Your true quarrel is with the state of man. In the particular, it is worth considering that refusing payment of the state tax does not reach the evil so nearly as many other methods within your reach. The state tax does not pay the Mexican War. Your coat, your sugar, your Latin and French and German book, your watch does. Yet these you do not stick at buying. But really a scholar has too humble an opinion of the population, of their possibilities, of their future to be entitled to go to war with them as with equals. This prison is one step to suicide. He knows that nothing they can do will ever please him. Why should he poorly pound on some one string of discord when all is jangle? July 31st. Webster knows what is done in the shops, and remembers and uses it in the Senate. He saw it in the shop with an eye supertabernal and supersenatorial, or it would have not steaded. He is a ship that finds the thing where it is cheap and carries it where it is dear. Every word of Webster has passed through the fire of the intellect. The statement is already erect and disengaged. Knowledge is of some use in the best company, but the grasp is the main thing. August 22nd. Teachers. The teacher should be the complement of the pupil. Now, for the most part, they are the earth's diameters wide of each other. A college professor should be elected by setting all the candidates loose on a miscellaneous gang of young men taken at large from the street. He who could get the ear of these youths after a certain number of hours, or of the greatest number of these youths, should be professor. Let him see if he could interest these rowdy boys in the meaning of a list of words. Editor's note. About this time Margaret Fuller, having left New England, to which she was destined never to return, obeying her yearning for Italy, visited Carlisle with a letter from Mr. Emerson commending her to him. See Carlisle-Emerson Correspondence, Volume 2, pages 115 and 116. During the summer, the desired picture of Emerson also came to Carlisle. Emerson wrote at the end of May expressing delight in Carlyle's picture, and said, I was instantly stirred to an emulation of your love and punctuality, and last Monday, which was my 42nd birthday, I went to a new daguerreotypist who took much pains to make his picture right. I brought home 3 shadows not agreeable to my own eyes. The machine has a bad effect on me. Carlyle did not like the picture with its heavy shadows. He wrote, I could not at first, nor can I with perfect decisiveness, bring out any feature completely recalling to me the old Emerson that lighted on us from the blue at Craigenputtock long ago. Eheu! Here is a genial, smiling, energetic face full of sunny strength, intelligence, integrity, good humor, but it lies imprisoned in baleful shade as of the valley of death, seems smiling on me as if in mockery. Dost know me, friend? I am dead, thou seest, and forever hidden from thee. I belong already to the eternities, and thou recognizest me not. Carlyle-Emerson Correspondence, Volume 2, page 110. End of note. A great design belongs to a poem, and is better than any skill in execution. We shall come to value only that excellence of finish which great design brings with it. We are liberal to the Astors and Vanderbilts and Websters, and allow their barbarous and semi-beast life to pass, though they give none to the Olympian and divine. Yet we ought equitably to reverence Pan and Humblebee and Cricket. One example of that would justify so much. We talked of the old Baconian or Platonistic canon. There is nothing in the globe of the world which is not in the crystal sphere. and our Parisian savant has discovered mathematically a new planet yet invisible. Wednesday, August, ? At commencement, met with the members of the class of 1821. We counted 19 present. Josiah Quincy presided. Also present, Angier, Bulfinch, Bunker, Burton, Dexter, Gardiner, Hill, Hilliard, Cheney, Blood, Kent, Lowell, Reed, Stetson, Upham, Withington, Moody, Emerson. A very cordial 3 hours' space we spent together, and made up at last a little purse of $82.50 for blank, adjourned for 5 years. College class of 1821. We have the less time to spend for these many years since we met. I must not detain you. We were here before, mere lambs and rams, and we have come back solemn Abrahams. And on account of Mrs. A. and the young A's, we had some ado to get here now. We that so ran and skipped. Scots like to come of kinsfolk, and there is an eminent use in having one's training in the public eye. But it is curious to see how identical we are. We can remember ourselves about as good and bad as today, 25, 30, 40 years and more. In college I had unpreparedness for all my tasks. I have the same unpreparedness at this moment. Who is he that does not remember the roots of all the habits of his chum and his set in Dr. Popkin's recitation room or in Commons Hall? We have had clients, pupils, patients, parishes. We have had hay to make, horses to buy, cargoes to manage, estates to settle, railroads to superintend, banks to direct, cities to preside over, states to govern, colleges to rule. But if we have done these things well, as I doubt not, it was because we could carry ourselves good-humoredly as boys. With a fair degree of speed, I think there is still more bottom in the company, and what pleases me best in the history of the class is its good position and promise at this moment. Its strength is not exhausted, our day has not been short, but we are not yet thinking of going to bed and being tucked up for the long night. I offer the sentiment, the preceding education of the class. At Phi Beta Kappa, Sumner's oration was marked with a certain magnificence which I do not well know where to parallel. He quoted Story as saying, "Every man is to be judged by the horizon of his mind." Taine, he said after Alston, I think, is the shadow of excellence, but that which follows him, not which he follows after. To the youth, the hair of woman is a meteor. I think that he only is rightly immortal to whom all things are immortal. He who witnesses personally the creation of the world, he who enunciates profoundly the names of Pan, of Jove, of Pallas, of Bacchus, of Proteus, of Baal, of Ahriman, of Hari, of Satan, of Hell, of Nemesis, of the Furies, of Odin, and of Hertha. Knowing well the need he has of these, and a far richer vocabulary, knowing well how imperfect and insufficient to his needs language is, requiring music, requiring dancing as languages, a dance, for example, that shall sensibly express our astronomy, our solar system, and seasons in its course. Our poets have not the poetic magnanimity, but a minimity rather, and when they would go abroad, instead of inspecting their inward poem, they count their dollar bills. The saints dare more, but I hate lamp smoke. I wish them to know the beautiful equality and rotation of merits, destroying their saintly egotism or priggism. Let them worship the apple trees, the thistles, and their beautiful lovers, the bumblebees, hummingbirds, and yellow butterflies as they pass, and, as I say, know the beautiful nemesis. All men are of a size. We are willing that Christianity should have its glories, and Greece its own, and India and England, but we are inly persuaded that heaven reserves an equal universe of good for each of us. Poets do not need to consider how fruitful the topic is, for with their superfluity of eyes, every topic is opulent. Spenser seems to delight in his art for his own skill's sake. In the Mui Patmos, see the security and ostentation with which he draws out and refines his description of a butterfly's back and wings, of a spider's thread and spinning of the butterfly's cruise among the flowers. Quote, bathing his tender feet in the dew which yet on them does lie. It is all like the working of an exquisite loom which strongly and unweariedly yields fine webs for exhibition in defiance of all spinners. Destiny. Everything will come home, and a man also. Where is his home? There, thither, where he is incessantly called. He will surely come home, and if long delayed, the more fiercely. Sunday, September 20th. A mood suffices Ellery Channing for a poem. Quote, "There I have sketched more or less in that color and style. You have a sample of it. What more would you get if I should work on forever?" He has no proposition to affirm or support. He scorns it. He has, first of all, Americans, a natural flow, and can say what he will. I say to him, "If I could write as well as you, I would write a great deal better." Quote, "As for beauty, I need not look beyond an oar's length for my fill of it." I do not know whether he used the expression with design or no, but my eye rested on the charming play of light on the water which he was striking with his paddle. I fancied I had never seen such color, such transparency, such eddies. It was the hue of Rhine wines. It was jasper and verd, antique, topaz and chalcedony. It was gold and green and chestnut and hazel in bewitching succession and relief without cloud or confusion. Bangor, Maine, October 6th, 7th, and 8th. 300 townships good for timber and for nothing else. Palmer Mills, that I saw building. The whole property was reckoned worth $60,000 before the freshet, but would not have been relinquished for that sum. Pines 1,000 years old, every year they must go further for them. They recede like beavers or Indians before the white man. Those Bangor men buy townships merely for the logs that can be cut on them, and add township to township. Some day a mine, a slate quarry, good marble or soapstone or lime is found in them, or a new railroad is projected. The timber land becomes unexpectedly what is called a settling township, and the lumber merchant suddenly finds himself the lord of villages, towns, and cities, and his family established as great proprietors. My friend William Emerson at Bangor told me that he thought Judge Story might be a great man, oh yes, a man of a good deal of talent and learning and fame, but he did not think so highly of him as a judge, as many did, that he had two failings as a judge. First, in point of judgment, and second, in point of integrity. You take my idea? New England. I think again of the true history of New England, and wish to see the just view taken with such grand sight as to omit all or almost all the chronologies and personalities which ordinarily constitute the tale. Now let us have only the aboriginal features, a God stepping from peak to peak, nor planting his foot but on a mountain. Calvinism and Christianity, being now ended, shall be ended. Their powerful contribution to the history shall be acknowledged. England should be dealt with as truly. English conventions and the English public shall not have so much politeness from us. Neither shall the forms of our government and that wearisome constitutional argument mislead us, as it has Whig parties and good boy statesmen. But we will see what men here really wish and try to obtain, often against their professions, what New England gravitates toward. All the materialities should be freely received to refresh the picture: the ice, the lumber, leather, iron, and stone, and the cotton manufacture. And we should not spare to trace these facts to their grand home in the geology, and show the man the contemporary of pine, chestnut, and oak, granite, ice, waterfalls, and therefore a worker in them, and how his commerce brought him hides from Valparaiso and lead from Missouri. The negative merit of the piece would be its resolute rejection of the faded or regnant superstitions, as of the Christian mythology, of the agricultural, commercial, and social delusions which pass current in men's mouths, but have long lost all reality. Dr. Parkman told me yesterday 'twas 30 years since he was ordained, and he could not credit that he was as old as his predecessor, Dr. Eliot, when he died. Dr. Eliot was an old man, and my infirmity, said Dr. Parkman, is my extreme youth. Whitefield's text after the death of his wife was, "The creature was made subject to vanity." November 23rd. Burke a little to Latin and Debbie sing, but what gradation, such opulence as permits selection. Webster too always has senatorial propriety. I wish to see accomplished translators of the world into language. I wish the leisures of the spirit. I please me with I know not what accounts of oriental tale-tellers, who transport and ravish the hearer and make him forget the hours of the day and the taste of meat. But our careful Americans blurt and spit forth news without grace or gradation, parenthetically between the mouthfuls of their hasty dining. Editor's note. The volume of poems that friends had been calling for more than 3 years came out at last at Christmas. There follows in the journal a list of more than 80 persons to whom Mr. Emerson gave them. End note. Alcott, among many fine things he said of my volume of poems, said, "The sentiment was moral, and the expression seemed the reverse." I suppose if verses of mine should be compared with those of one of my friends, the moral tendency would be found impressed on all mine as an original polarity, that all my light is polarized. Editor's note. Mr. Cabot in his memoir quotes from a letter written by Mr. Emerson to his brother William in New York on December 29th, in which he says, "I had lately an irregular application from different quarters in England proposing to me to come thither to lecture and promising me engagements to that end in the great towns if I would, and I understand the Queenie, not Victoria, but Lydian, to say that I must go." The proposal, however, did not take sufficiently definite shape to justify decision for a month or two. End editor's note. This is the end of Emerson's journal collection, number 37, dating from the year 1846, when the author was 43 years old. Thank you for listening.